Okay, I'm going to try to keep this short so the video's not too long. And I already went over this first part. This is the lesson plan template for our benchmark. Okay, and remember at the beginning I told you needed to finish it. You need to fill out this top part with your name. You don't need to put the date of field placement, but the age and grade of your students. Okay, you need to have at least one student with an IEP. Okay, so that you can address how you're using technology to address the needs of that student. You don't have to have a gifted student, and you should have one ML student, an English language learner also. Okay, student characteristics. If you look at this, it says identify your student's background, including information such as unique learning needs. That would be students with IEPs or MLs, cultural. Right, we're going to talk about the digital divide. So this, oftentimes impacts students from certain cultures, interests, language proficiencies. As I mentioned earlier, the ML students explain how these qualities will impact your instructions. So remember, I just want you to talk about really the technology here. So how is your use of technology? How is the makeup of your students going to be impacted by your use of technology? For example, you may discuss how students, you have a high percentage of students who are from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and therefore they are on the wrong side of the digital divide. And so you need to be conscious of that they may not have the necessary skills that other students have. You'll talk about how your use of technology may benefit or hamper the success of the student with the IEP in your classroom, and how you use technology in your classroom to address the needs of students who are not proficient in English, right? So that's what you're going to address in this section. Number 2A, describe learning theory, brain research. Okay, this is, we're going to talk about, for those of you who haven't had it yet, we're going to talk about learning theorists in 502. I think that's our third week. I'm not sure if this is due prior to then, but I've given you an article about a learning theory that kind of connectivism that connects the connectivism that works well for this technology-infused lesson. And I've touched on several other learning theorists. Okay, constructivism in general is one that I would encourage you to look at, but nonetheless, this is going to connect to, or this is where you're going to discuss this one. And the example I gave in class was, I talked about Vygotsky and social constructivism and his views about collaboration and more knowledgeable other. And so typically what I would tell my students in this section would be, let's say you're using a Google document. So you may talk about that your learning theory that you're aligning with in this lesson is Vygotsky's social constructivism, and one of the ways that you're going to align with that learning theory in this classroom or in this lesson is that you're going to be using Google Documents, and students are going to be working collaboratively to complete a group assignment on Google Documents. B, provide a rationale for evidence research-based instructional strategies, resources that foster understanding and respect for diversity, create a sense of belonging throughout the learning environment. This is a perfect place to talk about universal design for learning, which we read about this week. I talked in our first class about how diversity, we typically tend to think of that along the lines of race, but it also could be diversity in learning styles. You're more than welcome to talk about how your use of technology creates a sense of belonging in the learning environment or respect for diversity. But typically what I talk about students discussing here is how their use of technology in this lesson aligns with universal design for learning to create a sense of belonging in the classroom for students students with diverse learning styles. Number 2B, identify research-based classroom management strategies. used in the school and in the classroom to support positive learning environment. So one of the things I talked about the first class when we went over this was that, or the second class was that you could be using a tool for you middle and elementary school teachers, like Class Dojo is a wonderful technology. GoGuardian is another technology that teachers use in their classroom for classroom management. You could talk about, how you have gone over expectations as far as digital citizenship and responsible use of technology with your students. But you could also talk about how your use of technology in the classroom is going to engage students and therefore be going to contribute to creating a classroom with fewer management behavior issues, because when students are engaged, they tend to be on task, and when they're on task, there's less management problems. Okay, so we're already in the second section, which we have not talked about. Okay, and again, you're just going to sort of repeat what you have at the top about your name and students, et cetera, here, but you're going to give your lesson plan a title right here. And then you will give a description of the content you're going to teach, any essential questions related to your lesson, the knowledge and skills related to the lesson that students are going to leave the lesson with. The academic standard, the Kentucky academic standards, you're just going to copy and paste that. That's going to be addressed in the lesson, or standards. We should have at least one student standard for ISTE that is being addressed in the lesson. And then what are your learning targets? What are your objectives, your goals for the lesson? Okay, this item on student characteristics is going to be different than the one above. This is where you're going to address identify your school's ability regarding them doing skills, concepts, and processes for your learning. Here, what I want you to do for this lesson plan for this class, though, is I just want you to answer for me, what are the students in your imaginary class, your future classroom, what are their skills in relationship to the technology that you're going to be using in the classroom? So if you're using Google Classroom, do they know how to use Google Classroom? Is there a tool in your class? Maybe you're using Flickrs and students don't understand how to use the cards, the Flickr cards, so you need to spend a little bit of time going over that with students prior to the lesson. That's what you're going to address here. Okay, the next section is on learning targets, and you can see it's a table where you're going to identify what each of the you're going to place each of the learning targets that you have above in this far left column, and then you're going to list in the second column the assessment that is going to be tied to that learning objective, and you should use one technology for at least to assess at least one learning target. Okay, you don't have to worry about it at this point in time. You really haven't learned about Bloom's taxonomy. I've shared that with you in class, but we really didn't do a lesson over it. It's kind of beyond the scope of this particular class. You'll learn that more, hopefully, in your methods courses. You can skip that column if you want. Okay, then you're going to put the standard the standard that's tied to the learning target, and you should be sure to address the ISTE standard there. And then any accommodations. And again, this is really beyond where you are, so I'm not looking for you to complete that at this point in time, that last adaptions and accommodations column. Okay. Resources, just kind of what it sounds like. First one is identify resources, including technology to support. So do you have any resources? The first one is maybe you have some handouts, or maybe you have some manipulatives or something else you're using in your lesson. And then the next one, B, is just list all of the technology that you're going to use. Now, with that said, I should not get to this section and be introduced to any technologies. You should have addressed all of the technologies prior to getting to this point. This is just listing them. If you're using this lesson as a blueprint, this is where you can go and immediately just kind of look to kind of check off, do I have all of the resources I need before I start my lesson? But you should have already discussed in some form or fashion all the technologies you're going to use prior to this. And then the final section is the lessons and procedures part. Okay, so you should address, so the lesson and the procedures part is the really the only part that I think teachers in classrooms typically develop. It's sort of this is the step-by-step what I'm going to do in this class for today. Okay, and it's again a table, and you're only the lesson only has to be for one day. It doesn't even have to be for a whole day. It could just be for an hour. Okay, but the time that this part of your lesson is going to take, and then what you're going to do. So typically you might start off with a bell ringer, right? So you've got something written on the board, or something, a slide pulled up from a presentation with some instructions. As students come in, you want to have something for them to start doing, right? So they're not being disruptive, right? So your bell ringer, you can have on there just, again, as they come in, they look at that you have created a culture where as soon as they come in, they look to the board, they see that they have an assignment to do each day, and they're working on that assignment as the bell rings, and then you can go over it. Okay. Also, at the beginning of the class, you should go over your objectives, right? Tell the student, what are our targets today? What are our learning objectives for today? And then you're just going to go through the procedures of your lesson step by step, what the students are going to be doing over the course of the assessment, from you telling them what they're going to learn. Typically you'd have some format where it's I do, we do, you do, instructional format. And then at the end, you can have an assessment, right? You always want to be, and you can have ongoing formative assessments throughout the lesson, where you're making sure that your students are getting you're hitting your learning targets. They are, that's informing you about the success of your lesson. And then in the end, you could even use one of the assessment technologies that we have learned about to do an exit slip where you just ask them, three questions, what did you learn? What do you have more questions about, and anything other might be typical questions. The key part is if you see these bulleted items, you should be addressing each one of these in your lesson, and you should highlight it as it tells you in the instructions here. Each time that you touch on one of these, okay, you should highlight it. So let's say you decide I'm going to make 3A yellow, and I'm going to make this, and you can just highlight it just like this. And anytime, so at the very beginning when you go over your learning targets, in that section where you do that, highlight it yellow. And that's the end of it. That's the whole thing. All right, I hope this is helpful. I didn't get this done as quickly as I should have, or I hope to, and I should have probably broken up to two, but I'm not going to do it again. I'm going to put this up on YouTube for you.